think most importantly, I think that the fans should know that the team is not very frustrated or alarmed. Of course, it's been a tough situation, a tough month for us playing with 2 substitutes. So all in all, we're just hoping for the best for the health of Lucas and Andreas. And right now, the media picture is being painted a lot worse than it really is within the team, I would say. And then specifically, there's been a lot of like things that are not really true about the training schedule we have, and sort of like there's a lot of stuff that has just been said. I don't know really why. It's probably from some other contract within the Astralis group. But yeah, all in all, we're just looking forward to get the squad back together. And right now we're actually going on a pretty prolonged vacation, so everyone can like relax and get back the motivation if you had problems with that, or in general just get ready for the next season.
Okay, so I'm sure some of the things that you touched on there, Striker and Prof might have more questions as we get stuck into this conversation right now. But I think we may as well set the scene, right? Because 2020 hasn't really gone the way that any of us were expecting so far. There's obviously been the pandemic, and now there's tensions that seem like they're very high around the world because we can't do our normal bits and pieces. So for Australis, at least heading into 2020, before things fell apart, was everything feeling pretty good in the camp? Everything was going in the right direction? Everyone was happy and content to have another fantastic year?
We kind of knew that Lucas needed a break for a long time. gla1ve, sorry, needed a break for a long time. It was just more or less about timing it correctly and trying to help him cope with the stress that's related to the game, and trying to find a solution where he could actually continue playing. But in the end, we knew he was gonna need a break. It's been something that's been going on for a while, so that's always has been in the back head for a long time, even when we were winning majors and tournaments. So it was really a concern. I think that when we started the year, a lot of our principles regarding how we want to eat, like do things together, eat breakfast together, like be a team 24 hours of the day when we are traveling. We didn't really do that going into Blast, and I think that the biggest disappointment for me personally this year has probably been like losing against Navi at Katowice. But all in all, like going into the year, we were feeling really confident, and I also have to say that we kind of ended the season before the vacation pretty well with the 5-man lineup that everyone knows as Astralis. We won the Road to Rio pretty convincingly, in my opinion. Um, and yeah, we knew gla1ve had to go on a break after that, but yeah, we kind of ended, uh, as I would say, like with the regular lineup on a good note, and that's something I keep remembering when I think times get tough.
When you
Okay.
say you were talking about timing it correctly, right? Knowing about gla1ve leaving for a while and then trying to find the right timing. Do you mean in terms of tournament obligations, or in terms of like having somebody actually step in instead of him? You know, as we saw with the additions.
Yeah, I mean both are like heavy factors, because we wanted him to play the major and then probably go on the break after that, right? But everything just got so weird suddenly, and as you said, like the pandemic kind of moved everything around, so we had to find a path on how we would do it within like the circumstances we have. So um as everyone knows, we signed Patrick as es3tag, who is starting in 9-10 days, which is pretty exciting for us, our 6-man. Then we signed Yugi later on, and we needed a substitute, and a 6th-man lineup, 7-man lineup is something that we're gonna experience with, like getting some experience with. So yeah, we tried to time it, and we knew that like if we win the Road to Rio qualifier and we don't play the next Road to Rio qualifier, then we're pretty much secured a place in the next tournament if we come with the same 5 people.
I want to ask about you mentioned like you knew that gla1ve needed to take a break even before like 2020. So for viewers at home, like what is the reason? Like how do you know that someone needs to take a break, and what are the things that kind of put you into a position that you have to take a break from CS, especially from Astralis, like winning all the time? It's not like you're struggling and everything. I mean, it is hard, but the results are good, right? So it should be keeping you motivated and all of that. So
I think results wise, it's everyone thinks that because you are winning, things are easy. I think actually when you are the best team in the world, things get harder, because everyone are constantly one step ahead of you because they know every move you make. So you always have to be adaptive and innovative, but not ruin your game plan and ruin your game style. It's a fine balance that's really hard for especially Sonic and gla1ve, who are working on that constantly. gla1ve has been also calling, and there's a bigger responsibility in regarding to when you have to take a break. I think it's just listening to yourself. I think there are a lot of people out there that probably need a break, that are just afraid of losing their spot, because how the environment is like, if you say I need a break, they will just have to sign another player. There's no guarantee you get back, and that's also a stress adding on to the pressure that's always been there for us CS players. So for him it was mostly prolonged burnout, like he was stressed constantly, whereas when I had to take my break, it was more or less health issues that were kind of urgent and needed to be taken care of. So for him it was stress that has just been building up over a long time, and even the player breaks we've had haven't been enough for him to cope with it and really like get to the bottom of why it happens and how he can deal with it. So that's basically why now.
I'm just so curious because how familiar was the team with what the calendar of 2020 was going to look like, right? Because obviously I would receive a pretty similar calendar to what you guys would be attending, the guys from HLTV.org as well. And from you guys are one of the teams who started skipping events first, right? But from the way that I looked at the calendar for this year, and I obviously it's been a long time since I've played, but the amount of events, it felt like a manageable amount, right? Especially for tier 1 teams who had already been qualified for majors, didn't have to worry about the minors, didn't have to go through any of the qualifiers for the bigger tournaments because you already get invitations. Did you feel coming into the year that the calendar for 2020 was starting to lighten up a little bit?
At least the first part of the year. I always think the first part of the year is actually pretty easy, because people have to sign their sponsor deals and they can't plan their events like that early. You never really see events early January, stuff like that, right? So the first part of the year is always kind of easy. Second part of the year is always really stressful. So we knew that it was gonna be quite okay, but everything just changed, right? The start of the year didn't seem like it was that big of an issue, but yeah, I think actually it's been more stressful playing from home. I can say that from my own experience, because there are a lot of responsibilities at home that you don't have when you are living at a hotel. And there's basically, you work so much more, right? You see Complexity are playing a game right now. They just won yesterday. That has happened before when you are playing LAN tournaments as well. But I just think that online, it's really hard to set yourself up for a game in the same way as when you are playing in an arena.
Okay.
I think just something to add before you go on to, like, while we're still at the start of 2020, obviously the report that Richard Lewis did about your team and a lot of things, kind of encapsulating some smaller reports that happened before and stuff like that, kind of piecing it all together. One of the things that was mentioned there, that even like starting 2020 and after the early tournaments, that the team, not just gla1ve, but like the whole team, felt kind of burnt out, kind of maybe overplayed. And then going back to the end of the 2019, when you played, I think, 4 events in 40 days and on 3 different or 4 different continents, literally flying around. So was that the thing? Like, did you feel going into 2020 that you actually had enough of rest to start the season normally?
I think I actually said it previous. I don't think it was discussed that we needed to have a prolonged break as a team, but from my experience, I can say, like, afterhand, I feel like everyone in the team knows that we didn't have the same energy and not motivation, but I don't know how to say, like, work ethic going into some of the first events, Blast especially in London when we lost. We knew something was off because we weren't there 100%, and it's hard to say if it was burnout or not. I think that I can say that I was looking forward to playing, but if that flow is not there within the team, and how you're working with the maps and the map pool, then it's just hard to get into that rhythm, and you kind of need some losses to get smacked back to reality, right? So there was never really discussed any prolonged break or anything, and I think as Chad also said, like going into the year, it didn't look that hard for most teams, and we feel like we planned really well, and we always try to plan really well when the season's starting with which tournaments and where we want to go. But yeah, this time it's just been really hard, and that's also one of the things why we see Cibics is out now, because it's actually been really stressful for us playing from home.
Okay. So we may as well keep this going because we can always come back with some more of these questions around the reports and stuff that are out there. But we may as well dig into the es3tag signing, right? Do you want to kind of shed a little bit of light on why es3tag out of all the names?
He was the first guy that we signed, and I have never played with him, but I've heard really like good stuff about him. He's a really versatile player. He can basically AWP, he can basically lurk, he can play map control. He was never gonna in-game lead, even though he was gonna replace gla1ve for the first part of his playing, whatever you call it, right? So we had Magis who was gonna call, so we knew that he, no matter who he was actually gonna take the spot of, he was a player that could actually play those roles at a high level. I also think that he's had pretty bad roles in heroic and still performing great. There's just something you can see in some players that make the players around him better, and he's one of those players where you can see he actually makes the players he play with better, in my opinion.
I'm just curious, while we're on the subject of Magisk in the game leading, why him? Why was it so obvious that it was going to be him taking over?
I mean, like, he is really vocal on the T side, has always been really vocal on the T side, and I think that just personality-wise, he's probably the best, the most leader-ish type we have. I think that everyone in the team has kind of come together when Magis was calling, especially when gla1ve was there as well. They were like a really good duo. Like Magis was doing most of the calls, but then gla1ve always had an idea, always knew what would be a good solution if we were kind of running dry on tactics, right? So I think that duo was really good, and I think he did amazingly. Even though we lost a lot of games with Snappy and Yugi, he did amazingly as a caller. I just think it fits him. It's hard to say why, because he's not the normal leader type person you would see, and he's never been in that role before, but it just fit him perfectly. And I think that me, Sip, and Dupree, we would not be good leaders. I do a lot of the calling on CT regards to where I want to play and how we should play around the AWP. But the T side, I just try to fill the role and try to set up some of my teammates if I don't have a read.
I have one here that this one here is a weird one, right? Because we've talked about this quite a bit on the show. We did like a game changer episode. These topics seem to crop up every now and again. But how do you, like, obviously you're talking a lot from a burnout perspective, and that a sixth man is necessary to kind of help mitigate that. But in terms of your first thought, right? As if someone goes to you, hey, Device, there's this beautiful game called Counter-Strike, and we've always had 5 players. How about we throw a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 man in there? You know, like we have 2 in-game leaders and 2 AWP. How did you like initially feel about that? Were you like pushing back a little bit?
Oh yeah, definitely. I can say that I come from traditional sports. I played badminton, and I understand the thesis behind like going to a football team and saying you have 11 players, right? It's silly because they can get injured physically. They are in a higher risk of injury than we are, and yeah, I think that the dynamic of 5 players will always be stronger than having 6, 7, 8 players. But I think there is a desperate need from some of the players to actually be allowed to have these breaks, and not only in the player breaks when they know it's set in stone, right? Because it actually hurts the organization. It hurts the 4 other players if a player is not there. And if you just bench the guy and nobody wants him because he is burned out, you can't sell him. It's just a huge liability to the team. You have to buy a new player, which costs a lot of money. So I think there's a lot of financial aspects where it can help, but also a lot for the well-being of a person. If I know like my stomach is just messing me up, like the last 2 months, I just have to finish 4 more months and then I can go on a vacation. Like I'm not gonna be 100% at the level I could be at. So I think that we have to be realistic in the way we pressure some of our players. We've seen players go down like flies in the last few months, right? So I think there is a desperate need of this. I just don't know how it's gonna work out. Honestly, I don't know. Nobody knows, but I think that you just have to try some stuff out, and maybe it's not the right way to go. Maybe we just have to play less tournaments, but you don't know before you have really tested out anything.
Okay. Prof, you got anything you want to jump in with here?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the es3tag signing, and then that was obviously like kind of a big bomb in the CS community, like, oh, the best team in the world, they're signing a sixth player, they're trying something new, even though Ago did it before you, but doesn't matter. Obviously, when Astralis does it, it kind of has a bit more leverage, it has a bit more value. But yeah, then Zonic said that the plan is to have 6 players, have es3tag as a part of the team on equal rights with everyone else. Maybe he's not going to play the same amount of matches, but he's going to be like as on the same level as the other players. And he also mentioned that the plan is not to have like 7, 8, 9 players. And then maybe like 2 weeks later, we had the news about potentially being like 7, 8, 9, or ideally even being 10 players by Casper Hvitt, right? Your sports director. So what happened there? Was there like kind of a back and forth on the idea of what you want to have? Was there? It seems like there was a clash in some way about the idea of how the team should be moving forward.
Yeah, that's completely understandable, and it's a little bit confusing. I think that nobody knew that xyp9x was gonna need a break, and we kind of expected we could have gotten es3tag a bit earlier, since his contract was going out now in July. So we had an issue where we were in the need of 2 players, and we had to play tournaments. We have tournament obligations. So I think that there was a desperate need for another player, and I think that in under the circumstances, it was kind of natural to get a 7th player. But honestly, I don't know how it's gonna work out. I can't really sit and defend it that much. As you said, there was like, it was not completely planned. So that's basically what I can say about that. I think it, as I said before, it's going to be hard to see how it works out as well, because if a player sits too long on the bench, how are you going to know if he has the level? And if you have the 5 players ready, aren't you just gonna play with the 5 best players if everyone wants to play? There's always ideal situations where there are a lot of negative parts about having more players, but there are also some situations where I think it's going to be necessary. As I said, I don't really know how it's going to work out, so it's going to be a test period for sure.
Okay.
There was actually a point where it was reported. I think it was DK. I don't want to say that for sure, but I think it was DK who said that even you were at a point where you were going to take a break. Was that ever an option, or?
I think the only real time I needed a break after the first one I had was actually basically when I started again. We started winning after we won a tournament in Dallas. We were going to Sydney, or either it was Sydney to Dallas, something like that. And when we were in Sydney, the second time I was in Sydney, it was just chaos for me. Like, my body reacts so bad to like flying that way, and then we had to go to the US afterwards. And I was speaking with the team and with the organization, and basically I was just gonna go to Dallas. I was gonna bring my girlfriend, see how it goes. Maybe there's a little bit of like home feeling and a safety net, so to say, right? Because I've just been in all alone in Sydney without any. Like, it always makes it easier sometimes to have your girlfriend on tour. So that's basically the solution we had at that point, and then it kind of went. It went okay. Honestly,
That's
it
something
just
Chad
got
doesn't want to
better.
hear.
Yeah, look, I'm very look, when I see players who are playing a tournament, and I'll keep their names out of it, and then they I've seen it before, Device, where players have started a tournament without their girlfriend there, then they've qualified for the playoffs, and then they brought their girlfriend for the playoffs, which is the most important part of the tournament.
Then
and
they choke, right?
But I sit there and I think to myself, like, are they trying to win or are they trying to have sex? Like, I get it, you know.
Honestly, I don't think you bring your girlfriend for the sex. I just think some experiences are really cool to actually share with your partner. I think in Astralis we actually try to, when we bring a girlfriend, we don't bring one girlfriend. We try to bring, everyone brings their partners, and they kind of have a vacation, together, so to say. And then you share, if you win, you share some of the good moments of that. So I can understand where you're coming from, and I've seen exactly what could happen is that one player is not singing in practice room. He's not preparing for the game. He's not there for the game mentally. But I think there's a good balance of this, and we've been through that thing way back in the DSM days and stuff like that, where it was just horrible. So we've had
feel like
pretty strict rules, and it's worked out for us. We've won tournaments with every major with girlfriends. So
I feel like it's
it's a
so
bad
Astralis,
statistic.
man. To like, if one girlfriend comes, every girlfriend has to come.
I think that makes sense, honestly.
Yeah, sure, I get it.
Otherwise, it's just like
yeah, 100%.
jealousy between the girlfriends and all of that. It's not good.
Well, it's like when cricket played. You guys probably don't know cricket, but cricket's obviously a very big sport in Australia, right? And then when they go on tour, they're on the road for quite a long period of time, and the same thing happens. Like they all have wives and girlfriends, and they're called wags, right? That's what they're labeled in the Australian news, which is wives and girlfriends, and they do exactly that. They all go out together while the players are practicing and doing what they're needing to do, and then when they do have downtime, which we all know everybody needs, well, then they can use that time together. So the way that you're talking about it sounds very responsible. The way that I've seen it by a lot of these pros is not that way. They're spending the majority of their time.
For sure.
And so, look, that's obviously not related to you guys, so we'll stay away from that. I can really go off on tangents here. Now, we'll keep this one going. We'll keep this one moving. We've already kind of touched on the gla1ve and xyp9x situation. The xyp9x one, from what it sounds like, it sounds like I don't want to step over any boundaries here, but it sounds like he hit a point, something changed, and he had to walk away.
For sure, it was a lot of personal reasons we don't have to speak too much about, and that it wasn't a planned break. For sure, that's no secret.
Okay, so that one's easy. We can cover that one. Where we can respect the boundaries right there. We can start talking about not having to, but getting to play with Yugi and Snappy, right? And I think we did like an interview during Pro League, or maybe it was with the Road to Rio or whatever. And we asked you like about if you would be like mentoring for Yugi, right? You would kind of be like showing him the kind of your approach to the game and that kind of stuff. And you said that may have been the plan, but that's not the plan anymore. So do you want to talk to at least your understanding of having these two, es3tag and Yugi coming in, and the way that it was explained to you that they would be integrated, and how it felt playing with Snappy and Yugi when you played in DreamHack and Blast and stuff?
Oh yeah, sure. Integration wise, everyone, like, it happened really quickly. It was kind of a team decision to get a sixth man. That was something we've spoken about for a long time, but a seventh man was, as I said, a sudden occurrence of like need. We needed to have a player, right? Other than that, I think that, as you said, like mentoring Yugi, we had a little bit of a dilemma within the team where it was like, is he gonna play the AWP? Because I feel like I play a really good rifle, but the thing is, when we have to switch and switch back and switch around, I'm in a really good state with my mental health and with my health, so I know that hopefully I'm not gonna go on a break. So like I would like to keep playing the AWP role, to not like move around in roles, and we actually had to put Yugi in a role he's never played before, which kind of I think made him a little bit uncomfortable. But playing with those two guys, it was not the easiest time we've had. I think that everyone can probably, like, we should have won against NIP. We threw that game. We had a lot of games we could have won. But it was a learning experience. I think especially Magis got a lot of good experience from playing with Snappy and his way of leading a team, and he has good communication. He's just in general a really good player, and I think Yugi was kind of misplaced role wise, and I think that also shows a little bit on the performance. So I think you have to give him a little bit of slack for that, because it's always really hard to be like, you're joining Astralis as a stand-in. There's a lot of pressure. We're the best. We just won a tournament. I think we were still ranked number 1 at that point, and he has to play a role he's never played before. There's a big pressure on him to kind of perform. So yeah, I think that of course we're not like, we could have done so much better if we had more time, if we had more time to mix the puzzles a little bit. So in general, like, it's been a good month. We like experience wise, but of course result wise we're not happy, and we're also going on a break. Like, we skipped Summit because we knew we want to play with the core lineup if it's possible, and there's no reason to just swap points back and forth, and we knew that like we would probably lose points if we played the Summit Road to Rio qualifier.
Did you make the calculations? Would you have to do like a really good result to even make any
Actually,
ground?
yeah, because we had to change 2 players, so I think that we needed to be top 5 if I remember correctly. There's
Okay,
even a match between top 5 and 6 if I think so. So top 5, I think then we would probably have gained 100 points, right? And that's been with the stress building on top of that as well. It was just not worth it.
Sure, makes no sense.
And obviously the risk, because you never know if you're gonna place there or not. So you might just like play for another week and lose 200, 300 points.
Like we would have lost a lot of points, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just adding on to that, obviously, after, I think it was after Summit when you made a tweet, something about like, about the expectations about Astralis, and then Thorin added on to that saying something like, that you're trying to imply that people shouldn't criticize you, that you shouldn't be criticized at all. So tell me a bit about, like, at that point, the community pressure and everything that kind of built up together. How are you feeling? What was your kind of feeling right then?
Honestly, I was just trying to, as I said with Yugi and Snappy, trying to cut them some slack because people were really hard on them. Everyone was blaming them where they are just being put in an unfair situation. I don't think that it's at all we have this barrier of not being criticized, and we've always been criticized even ever since this core like started playing together. We've always had different issues revolving around us, right? So I never really think that we've been in some sort of like crybabies. I just wanted to. We still had a match, so I wanted to kind of protect the 2 new guys in some way, trying to maybe not get people to bash them so hard because they are in a tough situation. And I think that you can understand it and I don't know how to say it, like comprehend it in different ways, right? You can read it in different ways, and I understand that maybe people have read it like saying that we are immune to your criticism because of blah blah blah. But of course, we deserve criticism when we don't do well. But you just have to always take the circumstances into the matter as well. Like, so that's just my opinion.
Okay. Now, look, I'm not a huge fan of all the drama and the finger pointing and all that kind of stuff. But like I prefaced at the start of the conversation, obviously a lot of the concern from the community comes for concern for you guys and your health and all that. And everything that you've outlined here, it sounds like decisions that have been made to benefit your health. So the thing that you were talking about regarding the amount of practice hours, can I know you can't obviously go into too much about what's in your contract, but you made a comment there potentially about it being from another contract from an Astralis group. Can you shed any more light on what you mean there, just for clarity for everybody?
Yeah, I mean that I can't remember how many hours it says, but specifically in the Richard Lewis article, it says that we have a specific amount of time we have to practice.
It's 37 to 84 hours a week.
But there's
48.
not really like I can guarantee you that there's nothing like that in our contract. We actually have a pretty like I would say good flow with Danny, where he's just like kind of speaking with everyone. What do we need? How much do we need these days? I think that, of course, there are some physical trainings that are not like they're not mandatory, but they are recommended. I think that some of us are using that. So maybe we actually go close to, I don't even know, maybe 30 hours. I would say something like that. And then, of course, when we are traveling at tournaments, the schedule is pretty rough. But that's something we have chosen ourselves. We are a team that like to prepare really well. So the contract, it must be an earlier Astralis contract maybe, or a contract from some of the other guys. That's one thing, that's for sure.
Okay, and I got one more controversial one here, mate.
Sure.
Then I'll let Striker and Prof do their last bits, and we'll move on. We'll get to some fun stuff, I promise. So from you guys now, you were just basically saying that you were not trying to protect, but let people know that, you know, Snappy and Yugi being there, this is obviously a hard circumstance. But there was some comments or stuff flying around that the organization was upset that you guys as individuals were trying to like temper the community's expectations of you, right? Like, is there
Astralis organization, or
Yeah, the Astralis. I don't even know how to word this correctly because it's such. It seems
Well,
like such an
it was
absurd claim.
insinuated basically that
I
the
haven't seen
Astralis
this.
that the organization didn't really like your comments about the expectations and stuff. I think that was the insinuation.
I really
I-
haven't heard about that, but
I think if I can expand on this a bit,
yeah,
how it kind of makes sense, how it kind of fits into what maybe the report was and what other
yeah,
people
sure,
have been
of
saying
course.
about Astralis is, especially when Astralis went public as an like on the stock market in Denmark as an IPO, did an
Yeah.
IPO, that then obviously from that point onwards you're more susceptible to not community, but like what people think about you, how the news are shaped,
Public
right?
perception.
Yeah,
The perception of everything, and that's why, let's say, Yugi wasn't announced as a stand-in, but as a seventh player, because that's like a positive spin on it. And I guess similar thing was that with the tweet where maybe you guys say, okay, don't expect much from us, but from maybe the organizational point of view, they want people to expect a lot of you from you because like you're the number one team in the world and all of that. So you
Okay.
have to live up to the expectation that has been built with everything in the past.
yeah, I can completely understand that. It makes a lot of sense, but I haven't really heard anything from the organization itself. So I don't really know. But we don't really think so much about the business side within the team. I don't really think about Astralis being an IPO and like there's a lot about stock prices and stuff like that. We just in that circumstance or in that this specific instance, it was, as I said, actually for myself only just to try to protect those two guys a little bit. I know because we've been through a lot of things. The previous guys with community hate and so on, and it can affect you a lot, and it can put a lot of pressure on you. So if you are not prepared well enough for that, I think that you have to try to protect your teammates as much as possible.
Okay, so Striker and Prof, do you have anything else you want to ask Device before we move into the recent news?
I just wanted to then just to finish this off because you mentioned before about like multiple players changing rules. You mentioned Zonic as well having like doing the schedule for you guys. Has anything changed in the last like 6 months or so about who is in control of the roster? How do you really talk about these things? Who's gonna make the call to like say, okay, gla1ve is back, es3tag is on the bench, or Magix is on the bench, or like stuff like that? How is that gonna work?
As far as I recall correctly, I think contractually it's everything is Sonic, and I think it's also that's just how it's gonna work. But he is very much integrated within the team, and I think he always wants to play with the best team available. And I think he commented on this earlier, as you also said that people might not play that many games if the 5-man roster that has won 3 majors in a row are ready to play. They'll probably play. That's just how it is. That's also how I want it to be, if I have to be completely honest. So I feel like we have some right to protect some of the trophies we've won and try to, in some way, if you can actually maybe look at it as Chicago Bulls, we really want not to just lose our era on stuff that is not sports related, right? So I think if everyone is fit to fight, I think Danny is just gonna pick the strongest team, and we've showcased multiple times how we can, as a 5-man, be the strongest team, and maybe if it could be so that one of the other guys actually is better, but then it will also show on the results, and the fans will be happy anyways, right?
Sure. Okay. Striker, you got anything just here? You all good?
I'm
All
good.
right. Well, it got a little bit somber there towards the end, but we're going to get into, I don't know if they're going to be more fun topics, but I'm definitely going to get angry about some stuff. So let's get into the recent news. Lucas, play the bumper.
Just using YouTube.
We're back? Oh, we're back. All right. So I'm lagging a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. So I apologize for my video, for my audio, for those bits and pieces. I live on an island in the middle of nowhere. The internet is not my best friend. I'll try and get it fixed. I'll get the whole house rewired. I'll do what I can. But we're jumping into the recent news. And look, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. There's a lot of bits and pieces to dive into. And my favorite thing that has happened in recent times is the bloody Dust 2 doors being turned around. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen it at home, and people listening over the audio. Maybe you just watch professional Counter-Strike. We haven't had it play out in any tournaments just yet. Now, Striker or Prof, do you know if they're using the new version today in the RMR events?
I have no idea.
Actually, I'm not sure. That's a good question, to be honest.
Someone in chat will know.
I'm
wanted
pretty
to
sure
ask
they have
Device,
to.
but
I'm
then
pretty
I
sure they have to.
realized-
It's a major stuff, so I'm pretty sure they need to play the new one.
Okay, well,
Because we've never, as far as I know, we've never had like major events being, having a different rule
Rollback.
set than the
Yeah.
exactly the rollback versions.
okay.
So I'm pretty sure they're playing on the new one, but I actually don't know if Dust 2 has been played yet.
I think you probably bang on. I'm trying to have a look right now. I'm just having a look through some of these
Dinko
games.
in the chat says new version.
Okay.
So I'll trust that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes perfect sense to me.
If Complexity versus Big goes to a third map, they will be playing Dust 2. Just for those of you who maybe have multiple streams on, and you can see how it's hopefully, yeah, because fuck, poor Complexity. But regardless of that, those changes have come through with a big change as well, the visibility change. Now, there was obviously some bugs with it in the early stages. You may have seen that getting highlighted on Reddit. Someone could see through some certain bits and pieces on Nuke. But these changes as a whole, I don't know how much Counter-Strike everybody's had a chance to dive on into. It only feels like positive changes to me. Like, the Dust 2 one, Dust 2 was obviously having a lot of issues with that B bomb site, right? People have heard us for fucking months now, just sitting here talking about how difficult it is to retake that site and how hard it is on that map because you have to gamble stack, you do 4 guys long, or you can do a 3-man B stack in case of a mid to B. All those bits and pieces, right? Now, we'll start with you, Device, because you said before we kick this off, you were obviously taking a bit of a hiatus. You're on break, but did you keep up with these changes?
I played a few FPL games on Dust 2, but I can't really. There's not that much strategy depth going into it. But looking in general at the map, I think that Dust 2 has always been pretty weird with the T spawning so close to long. It kind of creates it kind of becomes the long 2 sometimes. Like if the T's have spawned for long every game, sometimes they have like 10 spawns for long, then it's all they do, right? And I think that this allows you to stack more long and, as you said, play more retake B, which is something that, if I remember correctly, there was like under 10% retake rate on the B bomb side, like something stupid like this. It's literally impossible to retake it, right? Especially if you get the bomb side early round. So I don't really know how the CTs will retake if they lose the bomb side early, because then the Ts are just gonna keep smoking the door like they've always done, and then mollying window. There's still this huge problem, so you can't really stack too much on A. But I'm really excited to play it. Honestly, I think that changes on maps are always it's kind of challenging because you have to challenge your mind into thinking new ways on a map you've played for the same straight 6-7 years.
It's probably good for an AWPer like you, right? To be able to play like
For
on
sure.
B Hill, looking up to the doors and shit, and being able to take those kind of fights. A Striker, I know you are going to have loved the fact that Device just brought up statistics when talking about this, right?
Curious about where did you find that out, by the way? Where did you see that?
Honestly, I just browse some like random tweets if I get tagged in a minute.
Okay.
I think it's the Stay in Pit Twitter account. Those guys always post like retake statistics and stuff like that.
And I always think it's really funny to look at like stupid statistics as well, where it just doesn't make any sense. But
That's my life, man. I love that.
It's funny because you can just sometimes you can relate so hard, and sometimes you're just like, what? It's never been an issue for us.
So what's the dumbest statistic that comes to mind?
It's been something like the percentages of rounds people buy dual elites when they win like pistol rounds. So something stupid like that. There's like, because people that do that probably have momentum and are winning, it's like the success rate on them are stupidly high, if I remember correctly. At least they were at one point.
Okay, so I don't know how much we need to dive into this change necessarily, because
I had one issue that I can bring up with it, or not an issue. It's just I feel like in a lot of cases the fact that the doors were inverted is not going to really change much about like certain setups, because I don't know if it's actually smokable from
tunnels.
From tunnels,
yeah,
because
it is.
Because if it is, then like you get an execute towards B and you still smoke it off, and the opera like in window
Yeah.
gets
but
mollied
people
off
don't really
because it's
execute
smoked
towards
off.
B because it's kind of clunky and kind of slow and everything, and people
Maybe,
see the
yeah,
smoke, so you
sure.
can counter it. So.
It's
But
taken
you
the
can still
rush
smoke
out.
off the op, right? Like very easily, if that's the
For
case.
sure.
So that's kind of my issue with it. That it's like in a lot of cases, I feel like it's not going to be viable for an opper to be like the only one holding B, or just like to be the supportive one in front of B and having an angle. So
I think the general meta around Dust 2 is you have to play a rifle close B, and you can't molly the tunnels in the beginning. You have to smoke it and play really close, because otherwise the T's will just set up for a smoke, molly, pop, flash, and then
Yeah.
just go in. And as I said, if you lose B bomb side in the beginning of the round, you can basically just save. That's probably why people are just saving so often, right? So I don't really think it allows people to play that differently, and I don't think, as you said, like reverting the doors, it might have some nostalgia to it, but I don't think we'll see the biggest changes revolving around the B bomb side, for sure not.
The thing is, like, I see it as like a small positive for the CTs, but like in some cases, in like those 3v3s and stuff like that, where people won't be executing and will be playing maybe like a contact play, like then you can maybe see the CTs having a slightly higher win rate. But it's, on the other hand, it's not really helping the T's in any way almost. So I think it's just like a good small change just to see how it works.
The thing that I hope what happens is it stops, or at least slows down, the B rush a little bit, right? Because having to deal with a long rush and a B rush, well, that is fucked. Like the idea that you have to deal with both of those at the start of the round, and they're both extremely strong, and you have to dump so much utility just to stop it. Like, to me, if you can now know that the T's at least have to get one player who might be a little bit late on the rush because he's throwing a smoke, and as everybody's limping out tunnels, maybe the AWP are playing retake on B hill, or the rifle can get one kill to at least give you a 5v4 retake, and then knowing that you can Molotov car extremely easy now, and almost that side of the site with the smoke tunnels is basically yours. Like, it's obviously there's going to be situations where it's not, but that for me right there are the two little changes that I hope balance it out a little bit more, right? It's obviously not a massive one. It's not a huge change. But let's see. Let's wait and see. I want to see some matches on. Like we said, hopefully Complexity versus Big starts going on that one shortly.
They actually have played 2 matches or 2 maps already. There was
nice.
Complexity, Hapalenio, and then Dignitas and Fate. I think that was the one that they lost the series on.
Okay, that's cool. I might go take a look at those games after, but we'll keep her moving. Now, teams handed ownership conflict ultimatum. Striker or Prof, which one of you would like to tell everybody at home what this is all about?
I think I was on vacation when this came out, so I'm just handing it to Striker.
Well, there's just a bunch of players who have a certain amount of percentages owned in different organizations, right? The biggest one probably would be the Brazilian guys in who are obviously a part of the cycle now because of the whole how it works. So there's direct conflict of interest there. I think it's like Fallen and Dead from MIBR, then
I
Zeus
think
from EG
isn't noted for some reason.
Well, maybe Fallen not anymore.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not
it's
sure,
Taco and it's Coldzera as well.
Dead, Zeus, Taco. So like 3 different teams, or players from the 3 different teams have a certain amount in So there's an obvious conflict of interest there. Then there's Get Right having a part of NIP, and Lurpus obviously being like part owner and ends in some minority. So that's basically what it's about. Valve trying to make sure that there's no conflicts of interest like that.
Okay, so I suppose the first thing with this is when all this came out during the Road to Rio, or before the Road to Rio, there was a lot of like finger pointing and stuff, and people were like, why is Valve not doing anything about this? I want to kind of, obviously, right, this is a very nuanced issue. I'm not an expert on contracts by any means. There's probably legal teams that need to get involved, all those kind of bits and pieces there. And when you look at all of that and you throw all that in, there was obviously a period of time that needed to be taken for them to work out where the conflict of interest were, what they thought could potentially be exploited, and those bits and pieces, right? So now that this has come on out, they're giving them until the Rio Major, is it, to fix these, Striker?
It was just before or something like that, yeah.
Okay, so look, I don't want to say that people are, could just put things in the names of their family members or those kind of other bits and pieces. Like, I don't fucking know the laws or the business or any of that kind of bullshit. But is this something that it's so hard, right? Because obviously Fallen is somebody who basically brought up the entire Brazilian scene with the Gamers Academy thing, right? Like, you think about all that kind of stuff that he did. Like, he nurtured and brought up an entire country of Counter-Strike, and then obviously some of the stuff he was doing. Well, I don't think Fallen is actually involved. I think Fallen's okay now. I think he was one of the names that was off of that list. So maybe I'm going down the wrong way here.
Yeah, but I think like your point was, let's say the team that was Games Academy was the Taco, FNX, Colzera, and I don't know who else. Two other players that came to NA.
Kenny and
was
Lucas.
Literally Kenny and Lucas. That was a team. They came to NA literally by the organization, by the project that was made by Fallen. So they're literally paid by Fallen, and they were competing there. And in the end, that really did help them to do something, to create a career and all of that. But in another way, they surely played. Maybe they didn't play against each other. Who knows? But there is that kind of a weird situation where you want to do the right thing, but in that you put yourself in a situation where like MIBR playing against, that's not like that really shouldn't be happening. Probably that's not the greatest thing. And then there's also minority ownership. Like Device is currently has some share, I presume, in Astralis, and let's say you leave the team, then you're in an issue that you have to kind of sell off that, and maybe for not the ideal price and stuff like that. That's like what GetRight is in right now, having like 2% of NIP. So it's where do we draw the line? And a lot of things are kind of complicated. But
I think it's pretty simple, right? The idea of competitive integrity needs to be held above all else. I think that right there is I'm not in any position to define that myself. But I think if there is any air or any possibility of any collusion behind the scenes, then we that there will always be a question mark whether or not it's true, whether or not they did anything. If people can point a finger and ask a question about it, then it brings it into question, right? And as long as we can avoid that with our game, then I think we're going in the right direction. So I'm not too sure if we need to spend a lot of time on this one. Device, I assume, do you have anything you want to say about this?
No, I completely agree with you. I just think that you just have to remove any conflict of interest that could be, even though it's not probably gonna be a conflict of interest within the game, as long as there is just a little tiny percentage of something happening, then people will always assume the worst. And I think that if you can remove it, then best case scenario, right?
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go on to one where we can direct the questioning directly to you. This is Snappy to Contact. Now, this was actually something which I think we floated with the idea on a previous show that might actually be a good idea. So do you want to speak to at least your knowledge of Snappy and how much you think he can bring to this Contact team? And then we'll kind of divulge into the rest of the bits and pieces.
For sure. I think that they've always had a great team. When they had Nexa and Hunter, they were even better, in my opinion. Of course, I think that when Hunter left them, they didn't really feel I don't know really what happened within their team, but things just started going the wrong way. And I can speak only for like knowing Snappy for a short amount of time. He's as well a player that makes the players around him play better. So nothing bad there. I think it's it's gonna be a good lineup. I think that with all of the young people coming into the scene, it's always nice to get some older players to kind of push them in the right direction. I think that Snappy is one of those guys that can help make players become more aware about the team and not about the individual status, about having good stats and maybe looking good so you can get picked up by another team, but more focused on winning, how you win as a team, and how you like develop into a good player that has the right priorities.
Okay, so I just sent you, Lucas, the article from HLTV.org, but can you bring that up for us and just go down to the lineup? Because I think, unless I'm getting my countries wrong, Prof and Striker, you guys kind of live in an area near where Emmy and Letney are from, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, Letney's on the bench and Emmy's on the main roster. What
Honestly,
do we make of this?
He's not even on the bench officially.
Okay.
Like they didn't say who is moving out of the roster. They just said this is the roster that we're using for the CS Summit 6, and they didn't disclose like what's going on long term or anything. So potentially they're both gonna be replaced. Maybe they want to do another thing. Maybe maybe not. Maybe they're just trying this out, and Letney's gonna come. Like, I honestly, like, I don't have anything confirmed. I would presume they want to replace both. I was just my like complete, no knowledge behind it. Just my presumption here.
Okay. Striker.
Yeah, same. That makes that make the best sense for me, just because obviously we were talking about this before with Emmy going from player to coaching and then back to player, just kind of out of fuck, I can't say it.
Necessity.
There you go. So that's something that he was obviously the first one on the chopping block. So I'm a little bit surprised that it was Letney, but then there was the whole situation with Letney that he didn't play in Flashpoint under like slightly mysterious circumstances. So God knows what's happening there.
Wasn't it Visa though? I don't know if it
well,
was.
I think it was like a combination of Visa and like personal issues or something, or like personal issues causing visa problems basically, or something along those lines. I think that's what was happening. So that part of it also makes me kind of think that Emmy is going to be on the chopping block whenever there's a player that can replace him. Basically, I think that makes good sense to me.
I have a question for Device though.
Yeah, go for it.
Kind of off topic. Talking about Snappy playing for Astralis. Obviously, it is kind of ironic because Snappy was supposed to go to Fun Plus Phoenix, and that was like almost set. And in that team, there was a guy named es3tag, and then that guy decided to go to Astralis, and then the whole team, the whole like deal fell apart. And then es3tag is like, okay, I'm gonna play for Astralis, but then Snappy plays for Astralis before him. Like that is kind of ironic, I have to say.
Yeah,
and then in between of all of that, Snappy almost goes to Mongolia, and then he doesn't, and now he's in contact. So just
he's having an amazing journey. No worries about that. Yeah, for sure. I think there's been a lot of memes. Yeah.
He's going Mr. Global in a fucking global pandemic where you literally can't move anywhere. This is amazing.
For sure. But as you said, I think at one point also they should probably look into like building a 4-man young team around Snappy. That's something I would have done as the organization, probably trying to pick up an FPL talent or something. There's a lot of good players in FPL that are without an organization that are like interesting prospects, especially for international teams. So I think that's probably the direction to go in the future for sure.
Give us a name.
I think that's Spings. I don't know if you heard about him, but he's really good in FPL. He's actually my numero uno to.
Who?
Spings is called.
Okay.
He's from Israel.
Okay.
He's really good.
That's a
19 years old.
Outside of the box one right there.
For sure.
All right. So because we won't get stuck too much in that team. We're eating through time here, boys. So we're going to keep this one chugging along. We've got Big winning DreamHack Masters. Now, I think that the way that Big have been playing in recent times is pretty fucking good. I've tuned into those games and I wasn't even working, which is pretty surprising. I'm kidding, guys. I watch all the games. Don't worry, relax. But look, watching them play, they had a lot of their players peaking, right? And this has to come off of the addition of Keto and Sirison because, well, obviously the hard work of Tabson and the other guys there, like this, and Zantara's getting used to use German better and all those bits and pieces. But I was watching them play, and I don't know if there is a better scout player in the world right now than Sirison.
No way.
That guy was
He's
nuts.
so good. Holy shit. Like, I've been watching him like this entire run.
I have to say, as you said, like hitting the peak level of some of the players, at least the peak they've had so far is probably true. It's also one of the things I noticed a lot when I was playing in FPL, like they're just instant. And I think that's really important when you're playing these online games where you can't adapt that much if you're just hitting your shots. I think that you're going to beat a lot of teams. And Searson is also a guy that's like, he's creating so much space for his team and he's doing a lot of opening frags, and I think that's one of the most important things you can do as an AWP because it's easier to get an opening frag as an AWP, right? So if you can do that consistently and that's something he's been doing really well, then it's just gonna create an easy path for the team to win a lot of rounds that are crucial, right?
And it's also that it's just they've always had a solid system. I think Big is just the problem has always been the talent, the depth, right? And now basically like they don't really have a weak link outside of maybe you could look at Dizian, but obviously he's put in roles where he's supporting a lot. Like you can see it especially in this team where he has all the stars around him. So like now that they actually have the talent to back up that system where Sirson is a fucking X factor as hell. It's insane how much what kind of shots he can hit and what rounds he can turn around. or just win on his own, like the scout plays that we saw in the second rounds against, was it FaZe?
G2,
Might have been. Oh,
I think.
G2, yeah, maybe. But it's just like that sort of X factor that Big have only previously had in Taps, and maybe then like you basically have 3 guys like that now on that team, and that's a massive upgrade.
I wanna just like give a lot of praise to Big, obviously, right? But Prof, what the fuck is going on with G2 and their mentality in some of these games, mate? Because I don't know how they lost Mirage. I don't know what happened there.
Can I say something?
Go for it.
For sure. I think sometimes
we have the expert right here.
When the meme takes over, like we had this issue, right? Everyone knew we were joking, and we kind of started joking around with it ourselves. And in some way, I think that created a downward spiral where everyone knew what was gonna happen, but nobody was speaking about how we handle it. And when we actually manned up and grabbed our balls and we started speaking about the real issues that were actually happening, then things started working out. I think being honest with each other and opening up is really important. But when the meme takes over, like it's something I see in a lot of teams. They have this reputation, and if the reputation starts like coming true, then it's just
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. It's so weird. You can see it. You can just see, and everyone knows it's gonna happen, and they probably know them themselves. So they probably remove maybe 10% of their focus. I have a little angry dog here.
No, you have to show him off, obviously, now.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's a very good point, right? Like Maniac, myself, and Samler, when we just did a lot of Deaths for Blast, quite a lot of our conversation, because look, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. It's quite clear to see that players are fatigued and tired, and having to go from the complexity one was the perfect example that you used, a grand final straight into the first round of a single elimination fucking thing for the major. Like that level of stress and fatigue and timing, having to time your peak and making sure that you're at 100% for every game. I wake up every day and I don't feel 100%. So yeah. I don't know how people have an expectation that 5 individuals plus a coach for the basically 3 months straight are able to perform at 100%. It's like...
Can I say something smart again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not about the 100%, but it's about if you have 80%, you have to use 100% of the 80%. So if you know you have 80%, then there's also like focus going into knowing I have 80% today, or maybe 70. If I use 100% of those 80%, then it's probably going to be enough. It's all I can do. But if I let that affect me, knowing I woke up tired, something is annoying me, then it's going to remove some percentages as well. And you're just going downwards at that point. So you need to use 100% of what you wake up with that day. That's one good mentality to
this reminds me of the I think it's DDK and Elige podcast, when Elige was talking about like the ABC game, and like if you know it's a kind of not the best day, it's like the B game, so you know what you're doing in your B game. You're not doing the same peaks and stuff as you're doing on the A game.
For sure.
So I like when I hear multiple people saying things that are kind of the same but in different words, then I know that there's something to it. You know, it's not like you just read it in a book and you're just like paraphrasing it. It's just like people have gotten to the same conclusion but like doing different stuff, so that I think that means something.
For sure.
All about the percentages. I like that too.
So do we want to dive in any more on what happened in DreamHack Masters, or do we want to get to the more recent Blast event?
I think we can go
let's
on.
Go Blast, yeah.
Okay, because when we get into Blast, after we get through that, we're probably going to have a quick conversation about the best of 5 with 1 map advantage, and a double elimination with the best of 3 and no map advantage. But we'll get to that. I want to hear some opinions on that one. For Blast, if you didn't tune in, obviously that event started all the way back in late January. That's when we were on LAN. Everything was still normal. And then we've had to change and shift things to online. So if you missed it, ladies and gentlemen, what happened was they separated into 2 different divisions, kind of like what happened with the Pro League. And we had the EU side of things, which had obviously a lot more household names. But for people who aren't familiar, Complexity have spent the better part of the last 3 months in Europe just boot camping. And they went on to win the European side of things. EG went on to win the North American side of things. But let's start with you here, Prof. In terms of the type of Counter-Strike that we saw from Complexity, were you impressed?
Overall, I'd say they played pretty well. Like, I think they played that similar to Vitality in a way, like kind of disruptive, kind of like anti-strategy. I mean, they even said that themselves, and it's funny because that's the storyline that started at the beginning of Blast, and when they beat you guys, they beat Astralis and they beat Vitality, right, or Navi, and then they finished second. So it's kind of the same storyline that built them all the way until the end here and until the win. Even though I think Vitality probably should have taken that game overall. I think the fatigue factor definitely played into it at the end of that second, like the grand final best of 3. But like props to Complexity for playing so well overall.
Okay. Yeah, no, I enjoyed what I was seeing right there. But Device, with this complexity team, right? Now, you obviously played against them earlier in the year, and I'm not sure if you practiced against them or whatever, but did you think that they were going to be like a team who could contend in this kind of fashion?
Both yes and no. I think they have some interesting pieces in their team. Young guys that need experience, especially on the big stage. I think that's maybe also playing a little bit into their favor, right? That they have big contracts. They're expected to win, and now they've actually won a huge tournament. Like there's a big prize pool at Blast, and as you said, like winning an EU is probably a little bit more. I could say like it's probably deserving a little bit more credit than winning an NA in my opinion. I don't know where the level of the NA teams are, so we don't really know, right? Anyways, no, I didn't expect them to win a big tournament in the first half year of the first season, but I was really impressed with what I've seen. As you said, like the anti-stratting is something us as players in Astralis notice pretty quickly, like nade stacks, something throwing your smokes differently if you know like playing different maps, especially in Nuke. Like they're playing Nuke, they know that the cities like to extinguish the first smoke in the jump through smokes in Yard, right? Something like throwing your smokes differently and using different tactics, always adapting to the opponent, is something we notice really quickly because it's something we do ourselves. And I think that especially the nade stacks and adapting is something they've been really good at. One thing that I've seen though on their player camps is that they can get pretty easily frustrated when they are losing rounds, and especially yesterday you could see like visible emotions, which sometimes is really positive, but it can also be negative if it goes like into a situation where you're experiencing too much negativity. Then like there's a toxic environment in the TeamSpeak. You've also seen a team like Navi, where I think that with I don't know. I don't speak the language, but the small things we've seen from the team, I like. At least the narrative is that the TeamSpeak is it's a toxic environment. It's hard to be yourself in some way, right? And it makes people take less risks and play more safely. Play not to lose instead of playing to win.
Wow, that's an interesting take.
I feel like for Navi, it works the complete other way. It's just like the more crazy it gets on the TeamSpeak, the crazier the team gets, and the more peaks they do and stuff like that. I feel like Navi and Vitality are the same in this sense, and Complexity actually in part too. But I think they are actually the best out of those three in that case.
I think as well with the complexity thing, obviously for these guys in terms of tier 1 grand finals, for a lot of them, that's their first time, or that's their first time with all those eyes and that level of pressure and so much on the line. And that, because obviously when Jason Lake comes out and says he's going to build the Juggernaut, you alluded to it just there perfectly, Device, about all the extra pressure that's on them. So for them to perform, and it's obviously an emotional thing based on the fact that Obo and Rush as well have been stuck, well, not stuck, but they've opted to stay away from home for this long amount of time to continue to perform and practice. And I think that's really accelerated them as a team. So we're seeing these fantastic results out of them now. But let's quickly flick on over the EG situation here, Striker. Now, when we went into the grand final against MIBR, they'd already lost to them. Did you feel like it was going to happen again?
Actually, it was. The thing is, like, it's so hard to make out what's going to happen in NA just because they play each other literally all the time, and it's not like there's massive like one-sided rivalries in NA at this point. It feels pretty back and forth outside of like Furiat and IBR, which obviously happened for the first time at this tournament. But other than that, like the people beat each other all the time, and it happened even like all the way last year. So it's like literally every NA match I go into, I have no idea what's going to happen just because of that. So it's like it's so hard to make an informed opinion about what's happening in NA at this point.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing, right? The level is difficult to get a grasp on, but there was some positives there. Did you guys see Breeze was actually
Yeah, he was pretty good.
having a
Yeah.
yeah, and that right there is something which when I look at that kid, he mechanically as a player is super gifted, but I don't know what it is as to why he had dropped off in recent times. I didn't know, like, because when you think about it, when Daps was there, they were making top four at basically every event they were going to, right? Then Stan came in, they get the high in New York, and then from there their results are super inconsistent. Now we can put the tail end of last year down to burnout, but this year, like their schedule, it's still been pretty rough. I won't lie; they've been having to play a lot more online matches and all those bits and pieces. But I felt like that would have been a really good time for them to retool and refocus. I think the addition of Zeus is going to be a good one overall because he might be able.
Would you say it's the best edition of 2020? Maybe?
Now, my friend Moses, he says a lot of things. My friend Moses, and that one there, I probably wouldn't agree with. There's probably going to be a lot of good roster moves, but it might be one that, if you look at it in terms of what the team needed, maybe you could justify it as being a very good one from that point of view. Because one of my issues with a lot of these North American teams, and I'll lump Liquid into the same bucket, and I'll put 100 Thieves into that same bucket as well, is quite a poor mentality when things go wrong. I think that in playing in English speaking teams myself and seeing certain type of, if you look at Naf, right, as a person, you can see that he's quite reserved. But then when he has like an interview and he's like pretty cocky and stuff, that's the way I think he is in the server. But to deal with problems and when issues are start going wrong, I feel like he might be the type of player to vocally shut down, but in the game fire up, right? Like he'll go for more crazy plays, or like I think like for Stewie as a player, when he starts getting frustrated, he starts to emotionally lose it, right? So everybody loses it in different ways, but I don't think that they're with any of these North American teams that they're all on the same wavelength to be able to keep themselves like calm enough, right? Now, if Zeus can come and be the emotion, the good emotion for EG, because I think Stan can be good emotion when things were working. We all remember him pounding the desk when they were winning in that grand final, and that level of emotion is contagious, right? Zeus has come from Brazil. He's always played with passionate teams, and if he can have that for the team all the time, it's a very difficult thing to do. I think that will help the guys who are feeling down and out. And no offense to Chet, right? No offense to Chet whatsoever. To me, he didn't seem like that type of guy. Prof, what do you think?
I think they're completely different. Like as people, completely different people. Like Zeus and Chet. I don't think you can find like two more like, how do you say, diagonally positioned people like overall. So yeah, I see the benefit there. Also, just the way the whole NA thing played out was super weird. It's just continuation of all of these. Not say weird, like when you look at the matches, you can see all of these teams and players have good players. They know how to play CS. It's not like a super surprise. But when you look at all of the winners we had EG, then Complexity, then we had Furia before winning, okay, but then we had Big also winning an event where all of the top teams are. It's like nothing makes sense. It's just like a compilation of everyone can win. Just like give everyone one title. You win a trophy. You win a trophy. Except G2, but you're number one in the world, even though you didn't win anything. It's like everyone wins. It seems like.
Yeah, that's a
except Astralis,
mate.
Oh, you guys won too. Come on.
Yeah.
When they play out that clip at Blast, that I'm sitting there in the ad break waiting to come back, and the last little quip, I go like, "Well, it feels like everybody won this weekend except Astralis." I'm like, I didn't realize I was that much of a cunt. Why did I say that? I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, all right. Now this next bit, what is this about? FaZe third place mental block. What